Before you place a single trace in KiCad, there's a decision you must make that affects every aspect of the design. That's the PCB Stackup to use. The Stackup determines how many copper layers your board has, what those layers do, what material separates them, and how thick each layer is. Every routing decision depends on the Stackup being settled first. This lecture is a conceptual primer. It covers what a stackup is, what the materials are, how different layer types behave, and how to choose the right layer count for a given design. Impedance calculation is a separate topic which I'll discuss in the next lecture. Here, the goal is to build the mental model that makes the maths meaningful when we get there. A PCB stackup is the ordered sequence of all layers that make up a finished circuit board. The stackup defines the number, type, order, and thickness of every layer in the board. Think of it as a blueprint for the board's physical structure. It must be decided before layout begins because trace impedance, return path geometry, and layer assignment all depend on it. A typical stackup alternates between two types of non-copper material. The first one is the core. The core is fully cured, rigid fiberglass epoxy laminate with copper foil bonded to one or both sides. It's the structural backbone of the board. The second is a prepreg, short for pre-impregnated. Prepreg is a fiberglass weave partially impregnated with resin that is only partially cured. During lamination, heat and pressure cause the resin to flow, bond to adjacent copper layers, and fully cure. The resin acts as both adhesive and electrical insulator. The core sits at the center of the stackup. Prepreg layers are placed outside it. Copper foil is laminated onto the outer surfaces. Stack them all together under heat and pressure, and you have a finished laminated circuit board. The insulating material between copper layers is not electrically passive. Its properties directly affect trace impedance, signal propagation speed, and signal loss. So it's worth understanding what it's made of. FR4 is the standard substrate material for the vast majority of PCBs, including the project board in this course. FR stands for flame retardant. It meets the UL94V0 flammability rating, at least in commercial PCB grade formulations. The numeral 4 refers to the material class, a woven glass reinforced epoxy laminate. It offers a good balance of electrical insulation, mechanical strength, moisture resistance, and cost. The key electrical parameter is the dielectric constant, written as dk or epsilon r. That's the Greek epsilon letter followed by lowercase r. For FR4, dk ranges from 3.8 to 4.0 depending on the glass weave style, resin content, and copper foil roughness. A working assumption of 4.2 to 4.5 is reasonable for budget calculations at frequencies up to about 1 GHz. However, treat decay as a variable, not a fixed constant. Different fabricators, different glass styles, different board grades may all shift the value, and always use your fabricator's own stackup data when calculating impedance. The second parameter that is important here is the dissipation factor, or dF. This measures how much signal energy is converted to heat as a wave travels through the dielectric. FR4 has a dF of approximately 0.02 at 1 GHz. That's relatively high compared to specialist high-speed laminates, which sit around 0.003 to 0.005, depending on the specific laminate and frequency. For our project, standard FR4 is fully adequate. Its limitations only become significant above approximately 1 to 2 GHz. Every copper layer in a stackup serves one of three roles: signal layer, ground plane, or power plane. Signal layers carry routed traces between components. On the outer surfaces of the board, which are the top and bottom layers, they form what are called microstrip transmission lines. On inner layers, sandwiched between two reference planes, they form stripline transmission lines. We'll come back to that distinction shortly. Ground planes are continuous copper layers connected to ground. They serve several purposes simultaneously. At high frequencies, they provide the return path for signal currents. They define a stable voltage reference that enables controlled impedance routing. They act as an electromagnetic shield that helps contain radiated emissions. and the large copper area also helps spread heat. Ground planes are the most important layer type for signal integrity. Every high-speed signal needs a closely coupled ground reference. Power planes are continuous copper layers connected to a supply rail such as 3.3 volts, 1.8 volt, and so on. They distribute supply voltage uniformly across the board with very low DC resistance, minimizing voltage drops. A power plane can also act as a secondary reference plane for an adjacent signal layer because at high frequencies, a power plane couples to ground through decoupling capacitors. However, a ground plane is always the preferred reference. A power plane is a compromise. When you must choose, put your high-speed signals on the layer that sits next to the ground plane, not the power plane. Here's a physical principle that makes ground planes so important. This is one of the most useful things you can understand about PCB design. At DC, current takes the path of least resistance. At high frequencies, those above a few kilohertz that is, current takes the path of least impedance. Those are not the same path. When a signal travels along a trace on the top copper layer, a return current must flow back to the source. In a board with a solid ground plane directly beneath the signal layer, that return current flows in the ground plane, concentrated in a narrow band directly under the forward trace. The current loop, which is the area enclosed by the forward path and the return path, is very small. Small loop area means low radiated emissions and low susceptibility to interference. If we remove the ground plane, the return current will have no direct path. It must find its way back through whatever ground connections exist. It may be routed through traces, ground pores, or can jump through vias. The return path wanders, and then the loop area becomes large. A large loop area is an efficient antenna. It both radiates interference and picks it up. And this is why every high-speed signal needs a closely coupled reference plane, not just for impedance control, but also for keeping the return current dissipated and the loop area small. On a two-layer board without a dedicated ground plane, this is the central challenge of the layout. On a board with more layers, such as 4 or 6, dedicated reference planes make this work easier, and the results are better. We'll address this directly later on. The position of a signal trace within the stackup determines what type of transmission line it forms. This has practical consequences for signal integrity and debugging. A microstrip is a trace on an outer layer, on the top or bottom layer, with one reference plane below it. The trace has dielectric beneath it, but air above it. This mixed medium makes microstrip slightly more susceptible to radiated emissions and external interference because the electromagnetic field partially extends into the air. The advantage, of course, is accessibility. You can probe microstrip traces during bring-up, and component placement and via fan-out are straightforward. A stripline is a trace on an inner layer, sandwiched between two reference planes. The electromagnetic field is fully confined within the dielectric between the planes. This gives much better shielding and lower emissions. The cost is accessibility, as you can't probe a buried trace, and via fan-out becomes more complex. For high-speed signals where EMI is a concern, stripline is preferred. For general signals and ease of debug, microstrip is fine. One important rule follows from this. Never place two signal layers directly adjacent to each other without a reference plane between them. Without a separating ground plane, the fields from traces on one layer couple into the other. This is crosstalk and it degrades signal integrity. On a two-layer board, there are no inner layers. All routing is microstrip. There's no option of using stripline, which is one of the inherent limitations in PCBs with only two layers. PCB stackups must always use an even number of layers, and this is not just convention but a manufacturing requirement driven by physics. During lamination, the entire stackup is compressed under high temperature and pressure. If the layer structure is not symmetrical about the board's central axis, matching copper weight and dielectric thickness on both halves, the two sides expand and contract at different rates as the board heats and cools. The result is a rubbed board, and in severe cases, the board curves like a potato chip after coming out of the oven. That board will not sit flat on a pick-and-place machine and components will be misaligned during assembly. A 4-layer board has natural mirror structure. Layer 1 and Layer 4 match, and Layer 2 and Layer 3 match with the core at the center. An 8-layer board mirrors Layers 1 to 4 against Layers 5 to 8, so symmetry is built in. A 3-layer board can't be symmetric by definition. Fabricators can work around this by etching away a dummy inner copper layer, but it adds processing steps which increase cost without adding any functional benefit. If your design really needs 3 layers, then use 4. If it needs 5 layers, then use 6. The extra layer is cheaper than the manufacturing complexity of going odd. Copper distribution across each layer should also be reasonably balanced. Uneven copper coverage, such as a nearly bare signal layer next to a fully flooded plane, creates differential thermal stress. Copper pores on outer signal layers can help with this. Choosing the layer count comes down to 5 factors: signal speed, component density, power rail count, EMI requirements, and cost. Let's look at signal speed. High-speed interfaces such as USB, eMMC, DDR, PCIe benefit from adjacent reference planes. A 2-layer board can handle USB 2.0 and moderate-speed digital, but it requires careful layout discipline, and higher speeds demand more layers. Next, component density. High-density designs with fine-pitch BGA packages and many differential pairs may simply run out of routing space on 2 layers. More layers provide more routing channels. Power rails. Multiple separate voltage domains can be distributed as copper pores on signal layers in a 2-layer design, or as dedicated plane layers on a 4-layer design. Dedicated planes reduce voltage drop and noise. EMI. Any products that need to pass electromagnetic compatibility certification benefits significantly from 4-layer stackups with continuous ground planes. Return current paths are controlled, loop areas are small, and emissions are lower. And finally, cost. 2-layer boards are cheaper and faster to fabricate. However, at most competitive fabricators, the price difference between a 2-layer and a 4-layer board is surprisingly small. The cost of a single failed EMC test can be orders of magnitude higher than the difference in board price. Here is a practical starting point. Use 2 layers for simple, cost-constrained, low-speed designs. Use 4 layers for anything involving controlled impedance, multiple power rails, or moderate speed USB, or digital interfaces. And move to 6 or more layers when routing congestion or signal integrity demands it. In the project board in this course, I initially opted to use a 2-layer stackup. That decision was deliberate, and it's worth explaining why. The primary driver there was cost and the form factor. A thumb drive is a compact product. Adding layers adds thickness and cost. For a board that operates at USB 2.0 speeds and eMMC at tens of megahertz, 2-layer is achievable provided the layout is done carefully. There's also educational value in the constraint. A 2-layer design forces a designer to think explicitly about return paths, ground pore coverage, and signal routing in a way that a 4-layer design with solid planes does not. You can't rely on a continuous ground plane to fix a poor layout decision. Every placement and routing choice has a direct consequence for signal quality. 2-layer doesn't mean low quality, it means disciplined layout. Many professional products, including cost-sensitive USB peripherals, are built on 2-layer boards and work reliably. The engineering is in understanding where the constraints bite and designing around them. After finally completing the 2-layer design, however, I realized that the effort to debug the various issues that came, most of which relate to issues we discussed in this lecture, was not easy to justify, and I decided that I should either remove capabilities such as sensors or headers to simplify the routing, or switch to a 4-layer stackup. In the end, I opted for the 4-layer stackup as the most appropriate option from a cost and engineering point of view. I'll conclude this lecture with the 6 rules to carry into every stackup decision you make. 1. Define the stackup before you begin routing. Trace impedance, return path geometry, and layer assignment all depend on the stackup you choose. Changing the stackup mid-layout forces a restart, which is exactly what happened to me in this project. 2. Every signal layer, especially those that are high speed, needs a closely coupled reference plane. That reference is what controls impedance and keeps return currents disciplined. No reference plane means no controlled impedance and no predictable return path. 3. Prefer a ground plane over a power plane as the signal reference. A ground plane provides a cleaner, lower impedance return path. A power plane is a compromise that is only acceptable as a secondary reference, not a primary one. 4. Never split a ground plane under a high-speed signal trace. A split forces the return current to detour around the gap. The detour increases loop area, increases inductance, and increases emissions. Isolate analog and digital circuits through layout, not through plane splits. 5. Always use an even number of layers. Odd layer boards are asymmetric. Asymmetric stackups warp under the heat and pressure of lamination. If your design needs 3 layers, design for 4. And finally, 6. Use your fabricator's own stackup documentation for impedance calculations. FRDK ranges from 3.8 to 4.8 depending on glass weave style, resin content, and grade. The fabricator's actually measured values are the ones that matter, not a generic assumption of, say, 4.2.